It is every police leader's responsibility to not only continually develop their own skills and abilities, but to prepare the next generation of leaders. Retired Captain William Frost helps you meet this task by providing a clear blueprint to follow in his book, Leadership in Law Enforcement. To learn more about his book and other consulting and training he provides, go to www.code33consulting.com. That's code33consulting.com.
I didn't want to work on it, but I needed to work on it. And I shared with Andy my experience, my bad call that got me to finally go, oh, I was in a position in my life as an officer where I needed some support and I needed some help. And I allowed myself to push and push and push through, but your body can only do so much.
It's super humbling as a person who's done for others for so long to be able to humble yourself to the point where you accept that kind of support from an organization. And
I mean, I could solve problems all day long and they're not going to always be the right answer. But if I can work in a culture where my line staff feel empowered because they're doing the work and they probably know how to do it better than the rest of us, that's a pretty special place.
A lot of chiefs that are struggling with how to, have a healthy organization, most of them that I've spoken to haven't gone to their council or their governing body and asked for money to support wellness. And I think they might be surprised when they do that they're going to get the support they need.
Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tum. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, welcome back to Blue Grit Radio. This is your host, Eric, and today I'm joined by two deputy chiefs from the region. And I was trying to come up with like a really sweet tagline for the episode. I haven't come up with it yet, but we got a duo of DCs, double DC, and we're going to be talking about wellness. We're going to be talking about individual wellness. And for a lot of folks, we recognize that as soon as you take on more responsibility, you're a sarge, your command staff, it seems to be that much more challenging in a lot of ways. Personally, that resonates with me. So I do want to selfishly pick your brains on that, as well as organizational wellness. It's something that both of you care a lot about. You put out a lot of information for the region, for all the community, for all the professions. So I appreciate so much what you're doing for policing, what you're doing for the region. Without further ado, I want to welcome our new guest, Deputy Chief Julie Beard. I'm just going to go and say first names, not out of disrespect, but because we have two deputy chiefs and it could get really clunky. So Julie, welcome to the show.
Julie works for me. My parents spent a lot of time on that name, so I like it.
Okay, good. And returning guest, DC Andy McCurdy. Welcome back.
It's good to be here. Good to see you guys.
Absolutely. So I just kind of wanted to open it up and see what thoughts you had on wellness. I mean, it's so elusive and it's very contextual. Everyone has their own perception of it, but how you reflect on wellness in the course of your careers and now being in senior leadership as you think about what it's like for officers and all the folks working in your organization.
I nominate Julie to go first.
I'll share something about myself that it's not a secret, as my dad worked for 30 years for the King County Sheriff's Office, and he died at 70. I think his job killed him, and I don't want to do that. It was hard. And so a lot of my decisions have gone into how do I live to this amazing retirement that we all get? Like, we work so hard for this pension. We make such a difference in the community. I want to enjoy all of that change and that sweet pension. And so one of my biggest missions is to live past age 70. And so most of my decisions go into that and how to get my people past that point.
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, I think that hits home in such a way, especially when people are, let's say, past mid-career, or maybe they're calculating their top five, and they're like, man, if I keep, I'm going to renew my top five. Like every year, you have a new top five. It's crazy if you keep working with longevity and you just stack the overtime. But how do we actually use that pension, right? That they're working so hard for, we're making all these sacrifices for. And I love how, I forget who put it out, but basically to say like, one of their biggest prerogatives is to milk that, like earn as much pension as they can because they work so dang hard for it and their families sacrificed a lot for it. And that is kind of the point, right? Oftentimes it is for family. That's why we do all these things we do. Yeah. Thoughts, Andy?
Yeah, like Julie, I actually knew her dad and worked with him when I was with the sheriff's department way back when.
Wow.
And, I also had a dad in law enforcement. I think when I was on your podcast before, I talked a little bit about that. And, my dad was diagnosed at 65 with Alzheimer's and was dead within a couple of years. And he only got about 6 months to enjoy retirement before he and my mom started dealing with all of the various impacts of Alzheimer's. I don't want to be that guy. And for me, when I think about wellness, it's meant very different things to me at different times of my life, different times of my career. And, with kind of recency bias, I often kind of cling to how I define wellness based on, what I'm dealing with right now. One of the more recent experiences I had in the area of wellness was that I was fortunate to attend Warrior Path. And Warrior Path we have a branch of it here in Washington State over in the Port Orchard area. And the Permission to Start Dreaming Foundation sponsors it. Eric, did I talk about Warrior Path last time I was on your show? I can't remember.
I can't remember specifically. Yeah, let's cover it just in case, though.
Well, so Warrior Path was originally designed for veterans through the VA, and it's completely peer-led. It was designed by psychologists. There's a lot of science behind what they do, but essentially Warrior Path is for people suffering from PTSD, and it's a week, what I call inpatient. It's training. It's not a clinical setting, but you are on site for an entire week. And while you're there, you get a lot of coaching and mentoringship kind of through your wellness journey. And at the end of that week, it's ongoing for another 90 days where you do ongoing meetings with your team and a lot of lessons and journaling and that kind of stuff. And the reason I bring that up is the model they used for wellness within Warrior Path to me was really powerful. They use a triangle, and the different points of the triangle represent mind, body, and finances. And then the center of the triangle is spirit. And so every day when you do your self-reflective journaling and you work with your group on gratitude and so on, and there's periods in there where you do physical exercise, there's periods where you do meditation, there's periods where you learn things as a group and reflect on your life and your experiences. But every day you rate those 4 categories of wellness on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the best. And then you reflect on and come up with your action plan about what you're going to do that day to address any gaps or weaknesses and also to build on your strengths. And I found it to be really powerful because it was a very methodical and organized way to do the things that I have struggled to really figure out how to really get my arms around. And wellness means so many things. And it was nice because it's real for me right now. It's personalized to my own experiences and my needs. So to me, that was helpful to look at that model. And I use that now, not as in a structured way like I did during Warrior Path, but I like to think about those different categories because they all bleed over into each other and they all affect each other. But my personal story, a lot of my struggles came from the fact that as a leader, as a police officer, as a father, I had, had so many different traumas piling up over my life that they were causing problems for me in all those different areas. And until I really stepped back and started to figure out what to do about that, I always felt like I was just focusing on what I liked and not what I needed. So again, just kind of thinking about it more broadly. As a leader now, when I think about wellness, I kind of think about that concept in general, but I think about kind of those 3 areas. And one is self, the other is my organization and the people who work for me. And then the third is community. And I feel like if I can find balance in those 3, that it helps me and the people who work for me really kind of figure out what we need to focus on.
Yeah, I love that. It covered a lot of ground, and a couple things I want to focus in on is we do recognize that it's contextual, and I like how you pointed out that it means different things even for you in your own course of life and career. And certainly I can reflect on my own career in different times when my physical wellness was not good or my sleep was affecting my emotions and my stress management, but then other times where it was just the work-life imbalance, and then that permeated into personal relationships. And so it can always mean something different. And that's kind of the point, right? It's different for everybody. But ultimately, I really think it's interesting how Warrior Path puts that, I suppose that trifecta, that triad, because usually we recognize down the list that finance is one of the big F's, family, friends, faith, all these things. But like finances is there. And it's such a sticky thing. It's really uncomfortable for a lot of people, myself included. I just never liked really talking about money or thinking about it actively. But ultimately, it comes back to like how we live our lives, how we support our families. And, we're doing this thing called work. And so I think it is very relevant when we think about how we are charting course. So I found that interesting. The other thing that I want to say is I have heard from so many people extreme positive feedback from Warrior Path. I know that it's not the only type of resource or retreat that is doing that kind of amazing work, and kind of want to pay acknowledgement to all these different organizations throughout the nation and beyond. But what I do want to take a moment to reflect on is for folks that feel like there's no way I could step away for some amount of time or a couple days, that's probably like you need to fight that, because if you feel like there's absolutely no freaking way, then that's probably anecdote that you need to find a way. Commonly people say that about meditation, like, oh, I don't have time for meditation. It's like, well, whether it's meditation or walking or getting on nature or making that date, that coffee date with your buddy you haven't seen in so long, that's probably meaning that you need to do it.
Yeah, and so I don't forget, I real quickly want to say too, Warrior Path, Boulder Crest Foundation was kind of one of the original organizations that started it. And then here locally, the Permission to Start Dreaming Foundation runs it. And what's unique here in Washington is that because Permission to Start Dreaming helps fund the program, there are 10 people in each session, and 8 of them are veterans. It's paid for by the VA. And then the other 2 can be first responders like myself that were not veterans. So it opens that door for us as another option. And they run it other than summer, because they run it at a church camp where they have summer programs. So 9 months out of the year, they run it 3 or 4 sessions every month. So they get a lot of people through it.
I want to hit something he said and that you said. We work on what we like, not what we need.
Yeah, that stuck out to me too.
You work on what you need when you crash, right? And everybody's crash looks different. I shared mine with Andy. We chatted last week. But when you hit your crash, you hit that moment and you realize things are going to change big if I don't take the time to get help.
Yes.
And so it's really easy to work on what you like. It is not fun to work on what you need. And finances for a lot of people are there because we don't like talking about them. We have public contract negotiations in policing. It always intrigues me, right? We all have charts of everybody's contracts. We all negotiate and look at what everyone else is making, but we still don't like to talk about money. We still don't like to talk about first responders who like adrenaline and sometimes have a little debt, chasing crazy hobbies like we all do. We like to talk about the fun that we're having, the boats, the trips, the cool stuff, but not the financial responsibility allows that to happen. And so I think finances for a lot of people ends up being that I didn't want to work on it, but I needed to work on it. And I shared with Andy my experience, my bad call that got me to finally go, oh, I was in a position in my life as an officer where I needed some support and I needed some help. And I allowed myself to push and push and push through, but your body can only do so much. You can only operate on so little sleep for so long. And then you become a parent and suddenly you have little humans who need you too. So it's really nice to work on what you like until you get to the point where you have to work on what you need.
Yeah, that's so well said and expanded upon. Yeah, I think finance, it's so sticky, and I've been fortunate enough to have been taught and I suppose internalized. It's not like other people don't know, but I suppose my mom set really, really good, I suppose, awareness, but it's still like tenuous, right? And so we get uncomfortable. But whatever that thing is, we need to be able to just be curious, right? And I think that a lot of people can recognize whether it's not having enough or having some grappling with personal relationships, whatever kind of little pillar of wellness we're going to look at the moment. As DC Andy pointed out, a lot of that's through life, like these different stressors and traumas that can be foundational. So I think the invitation should be for us to ask why. Like, why do I need the boat and the trailer and the Disneyland every year, twice a year? Like, that's too much. And I like to tell younger cops, and I feel like that old timer already that I even say that this way, but yeah, you can have a couple of the things. Like you can be a boat guy, cool. Like you can be a truck gal, right? But like you probably can't be the newest truck and boat and trailer and all these things, because like what is it all for? And a lot of times I get kind of sad for colleagues when they have all the things and they're strapped to even take the time because they have to work the overtime. They feel the burden to work the overtime. So like, what's it all for? And so many conversations to include Sean Barnes. He runs or helps run Stronger Families Now, but his F that he always will say, that's like the pillar is family, and that's what we for. So no, I appreciate you sharing that, DC Julie, for sure. It's kind of like a way for people to reflect on their own, because I would venture to guess, I'd bet a lot of money, speaking of finances, that a lot of people, as you say, like going at a deficit for sleep and finding that wall, a lot of people could say that they've flirted with that at best.
We talk about taking care of organizational wellness, not just ourselves and our community, but knowing that that's a why for people is pretty critical. If you have an officer who's working more overtime than everyone else trying to afford a home in our region, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're just working overtime for the mortgage payment. How do we take care of them? How do we understand and look at what is in their balance? What is out of equilibrium for them? And I will always caution as a working mom, I don't think there's true balance ever, but there's what is more important now. And it shifts around, and we all know that, right? Because in my 20s, I thought I could have it all and balance it all and have them all be equally important, but that's just not how life is. But being able to look at your organization and your people and figure out what's out of equilibrium for them, or in your, not just their home lives, but your culture and your building. Where's your balance there? Where's your equilibrium? Can do a lot in trying to find that holistic wellness.
Kind of aligned with what Julie's saying. Overtime makes everything better, right? It fixes everything. And, I think that the first responder mentality is when you're going through struggle or stress or trauma, you get your head down and just get it done, right? Push through it. And that works for a period of time. I mean, it works for us at work. It works for us at home. But when the wheels fall off, you still have to have the resources you're willing to access. And I think a lot of people don't have resources built up. For me on the finance side, specifically, when my twins were born premature, I think I told that whole story before on your podcast, but I think the twins were about 3 years old, and we had to go live in Colorado for a month while my son received treatment. And at the time, we had a pre-approval from our insurance to supposedly cover this treatment. I paid out of pocket tens of thousands of dollars for the treatment, came back, submitted our reimbursement. We got a check for $1,100. And it was this pretty massive bill. And the way we had to finance it, because we had to pay out of pocket initially, was on a temporary 0% interest credit. And so we knew we had to pay it off before a massive increase in that credit payments had to go up. So anyway, long story short, we also had some things at home we had to take care of. We had a yard that was unsafe for a blind, autistic 3-year-old. And we had a Auburn police officer who was on the board for See You Later Foundation that does projects to help families with kids with disabilities. And he actually knew our story, and he stepped up and actually did a fundraiser, and they came in and they completely rebuilt our backyard for us. And, it's super humbling as a person who's done for others for so long to be able to, humble yourself to the point where you accept that kind of support from an organization. And, we had an academy class took it on as their project to come in and do the project in our yard, and they fundraise for all the materials and equipment and stuff like that. But that kind of humility you learn through that kind of experience is what allows you to step back and do that valid self-assessment of how you're doing and where you're at and what you really need. So for me, all these different experiences I've had, I've learned a lot about where I fit in and how I can, mentor and support others when they're going through these struggles, because it's way too easy to just put your head down and get shit done. And that's only going to last for so long. And then at some point, whether it be physical, financial, spiritual, or all of the above, like I experienced, you can get to a pretty dark place if you let it.
And that's where I appreciate your example so much on all these different levels as a police leader in the region, as someone that's doing a lot of things that I, that resonate with me and they inspire me. But for you to get real as you have here and before, just to say you were so focused, and some of this is adapted from conversations we've had before, just things I know about you. Like, you're so focused on helping everybody else, and you could have used some, right? But like, it took some time and some circumstance, and I suppose some I don't know if you agree with this word, but like submission of recognizing you can accept help too. And there's a lot of folks in the industry, like in my circles, that they almost feel bad. They're like, I don't need help. I can do it, and someone else needs it more. I'm like, no, it's not about that. It's, we want to help and we can. And you would do the same freaking thing for me if the situation was reversed. And sometimes it takes literally outlining it that way, because I know that we use ego in a lot of negative ways, and it's not really that. I think it is an awareness of a level ego. But for me, oftentimes, like, I don't want to take help because someone else needs it more, right? But it's not about that. It's just we want to all help each other. But we do, nod to earlier in this conversation, we need to take care of ourselves first. And I know that notion is circulated a lot. Easier said than done, though, I think, for a lot of these public servants, helpers, caretakers, right? But who takes care of the caretakers?
Well, when do we shut our pride off a little bit, right? When my dad died, it was pretty sudden. He had some health problems, but it was right before Easter. And I had this amazing, I was a patrol sergeant. I had the dream squad, right? They were active. We had each other's physical safety covered, but it was also a psychologically safe squad. We took care of each other, we cared, and we just were so proud to wear the badge and take care of our community. So I don't like asking for help. And I'm an open book, but I don't want people to come to the house and help me. I could really use it sometimes, but I don't want to ask for it. But I had 2 little kids at the time, and my dad died right before Easter, and I didn't have it together. And my husband didn't have it together. We really missed my dad. We were dealing with grief. I'm from a large family. We're trying to take care of my mom. And my squad showed up one afternoon, knocked on my front door. My officer in charge knocked on my front door and delivered 2 of the biggest Easter baskets my kids have ever had in their life. And it was amazing because we had that. I could set my pride aside to take care of my kids, right? But I unpack those Easter baskets every year since then. And my kids still use them to this day because they mean so much to me. They're starting to fall apart, but they mean so much to me. And they remind me that by letting myself be taken care of a little bit, letting my kids be taken care of a little bit, I helped also show that squad that they could be taken care of a little bit too.
Yeah. And that's that demonstrative leadership that is I think it's so vital, and that I feel very grateful that we're in a day and age where we have leaders. And I know, and I preach it here, where leadership is not about rank and role, but it does say something else when the visible official leaders are willing to say something and come from a place of vulnerability, because we're all just people. And for some reason, it is safer, right? You talked about psychological safety, and that is so crucial, and probably something that most agencies probably need to work on a lot, just because of how the culture is and has been. But just to say, hey, like, I had trouble with this, but I did it, and I'm so grateful. And just to support that notion, because I don't recall if I said this on recording or not, but as much as I'm such an advocate for peer support, which can be so simple in concept, I've found myself struggling at times to reach out to my closest buddies, just because it was like 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. I'm like, man, it's bedtime for their kids too. But I've been grappling with frustration and angst. But I'm like, no, it's not that big a deal. It's like, it can wait. It can wait till a more reasonable hour. But that's literally me, I suppose, being hypocritical about what I'm trying to nudge everybody else to do.
Well, I'll just add to that too. I think reaching out to other people for mentorship is important too. And I know, Eric, you and I have talked about this before as well, but especially when you're rising up in an organization in a leadership role, you have a smaller pool of people you sometimes feel like you can reach out to because you have fewer peers toward the top of that pyramid, right? But I think, again, going back to the humility, sometimes some of my best lessons have been from people who work for me. And so I have people who I reach out to for advice and support of all ranks, because I know that each of them has a different perspective that I need to hear sometimes. And sometimes I don't reach out to the people who I want to hear from, but they're the ones, again, going back to it, that I need to hear from. And I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah.
I'll add in, I have a rule of 3 for mentorship that I try to follow in my life. I try to have a mentor in my organization, and it's not always the person that outranks you. It's the person that tells you the truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
I try to have a mentor in policing outside my organization, so I can talk to them about the stuff happening inside my organization, but keep it confidential, right? And then I try to have a mentor who's not in policing at all. And I call them my middle of the night phone calls, because it's the person I can call in the middle of the night. And I've done it. And it's really hard because you feel like a jerk to call someone in the middle of the night. But on the worst shift, the worst call, or the worst family incident that you're dealing with, it helps to know that there are people I can call in the middle of the night. And one of the tactics I used to do when I first promoted is I would call my dad almost every day on the way to work, because I had that first year was rough as a sergeant. It was a hard year. And so I got my pep talk on the way in. And on the drive home, sometimes at 4 a.m, I didn't want to call anybody. But I would in my head go, are there people I could call? And I do a little mental list of, this person said they'd be there for me. This person said they pray for me every day. This is the next door neighbor who bakes cookies once a month because she cares about me. I have people who love me and people who support me. And I'm not going to call them at 4 a.m, but I know they exist. Those people keep you sane. Just having that. And then the trick, right, is who are you doing that for? I hope there are people who know they could call me at 4 a.m, and I will answer. I might be groggy, but I will answer.
Oftentimes, there's a lot of candidates that want to take the next step in the organization and promote. However, they find themselves at an impasse with where to start. Or they know where to start, but they know that there are so many different elements that are extremely arduous, challenging, and stressful to prepare for. I've prepared a guide because I want to help everyone, no matter what their confidence level is in public speaking, and highlight your leadership style. So for more on the guide, you can find it at bluegritwellness.com. That's the promotional guide at bluegritwellness.com/shop.
So
Yeah, I think that's the powerful kind of cosmic effect is, yeah, we can worry about paying it back, but we realize that there's so much more to paying it forward. And that's ultimately what our mentors want, right? That's so much of what this project is I feel so grateful to have a lot of mentors and to be able to meet and develop new ones. Like I know Andy better than I know Julie, but I'm learning so much today. But I also get to share that. I get to share that in mass because mentorship can be hard. And I love that we're talking specifically about mentorship. I like how you broke it down, DC Julie, as far as like in organization outside of police work. And it kind of pays a nod to keeping grounded and keeping things real because we're not just cops, we're people. And we know even in cops, like it goes beyond the patch. Sometimes that's how you get the best objective insight. So you're not just worried about all the minutia of, politics or this person or that person or history. It's just kind of the real talk. And I think you've both alluded to it in some way, but oftentimes it might not be what you want to hear, but it's what you need to hear. And so with that, you develop that relationship and you give those expectations that, yeah, I want that honest, raw feedback. And you make the promise and commitment to yourself that although you might feel your face kind of wrinkling up when it's something said that you don't love, check that and realize where it's coming from and that there's probably a lot of truth to it because someone that really cares about you and giving you the time and attention is offering it to you.
So Eric, I have a suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things I struggle with, and I see a lot of leaders struggling with, is disclosure, right? And I think that there's a facade that we all put up as a leader where we feel like we need to hide some of our weaknesses from the people who work for us, right? I think in our society, we think that to be a leader, it means that you know the answers and you have the solutions and so on. But I think the reality is that you can build a lot of credibility with your people if you also share the other side of things and what you're struggling with. And I think the way to do that successfully, in my experience, is to take a strength-based perspective, right? When you tell your story about your struggles, you should start with how you're getting through it and what you're doing about it, not just, I call it trauma porn, where you see people sharing all the details of their trauma, but for no good reason, right? So what I was thinking is, I don't know if it'd be helpful for your listeners if we run down some of what we're working on and how we're addressing it. For me, it's those three categories: self, organization, community. And then the way I do kind of that assessment and figure out what to work on.
Yeah. I'll go because this is front of mind. It was something that I talked to you quite a bit about, but with a change in assignment over a year ago, it's very different, kind of a very different assignment going from sergeant of a specific unit to command and being responsible for a lot more people. And ultimately, that is the source of the most concern. You're literally worried about your people being out there and little things, and then also people have all their lives going on. But trying to find balance is elusive, and I've described before it's more of like an illusion of balance. But trying to strike the right management, I suppose, of that with other side interests and passions like Blue Grit. But so a couple things I've done. And it's not easy and it's a work in progress always. But one is seeking mentorship. I've hit up Andy numerous times about different things because it is more helpful to have someone outside of the organization at times. And it's not even always about organizational stuff. And one was about a potential kind of supplemental work opportunity as a contractor training some material for a company. And I was really enticed by a lot of cool shiny things and probably an appeal to my ego, even though I would have said, and this is going back to my next tip or shared factoid or strategy, is I actually said that through this project, like I wasn't really into the idea of traveling to speak or teach. I wanted to do it in a way that enhanced and worked in alignment with my family. Like my daughter's young, and I feel very blessed, grateful to have, I suppose, that wisdom shared with me from a lot of people that I respect, that to not lose sight of that. And I feel like I'm ahead of the curve in a lot of people my age that are maybe coming up in their career. Career's a huge deal for me, absolutely. However, to say, what's more important is my wife and my daughter. Again, work in progress. So I'm not trying to put myself on a pedestal. I frequently grapple with checking my work phone, checking my personal phone, little girl saying, "Hey, dad, dad, dad." And I'm like, "Yeah, one sec." Like, and I feel so bad when I recognize I did it and I still have to grapple with it. So all to say, mentorship was absolutely helpful. And then the second piece to that, and you asked some really critical questions, DC Andy. You're like, who needs who more? And you asked questions that helped me reflect on what it was. Did it align with my purpose? And you can make, you can like what you like, right? So you can pursue things you like. You can make things align with your purpose. Like at 11 o'clock at night, if I am home late and I'm cold and I'm hungry, I can make, whatever crud in the pantry suit my purpose. I can say that this aligns with what I need, even though it's not really objectively true. But the second strategy, before I keep going on, is referencing like my personal mission statement and a sense of like a personal constitution. And I've shared a little bit before, but a shout out to Dr. Gino Kalura. He's come on the show and described this. And at the time he did, I'd been dragging my feet. I'd heard the notion before. I'd heard him talk about it before. And I just didn't want to commit. And the way my mind works, it was a lot of work and uncomfortable work I didn't want to do. But ultimately, I started doing it and started with bullet points on paper and a pen on a flight because I was stuck there. And then I rewrote it. And ultimately, with that decision of the potential gig, I read it. I was leaning a certain way already. And I think I knew the right answer. I did. But when I read it again and read what I wanted to be about and what I wanted my decisions and my outlook to be aligned with, it did not track. Like there were parts of it that were kind of cool, but really, we come down to the things I shared, which is like I wanted to be available and I wanted to be responsive to my work and my family, most importantly. And it just didn't really jive with that. Who's up next?
I can go if you want. So you said something there about balance, and I've gotten to a point where I realize balance is always going to be elusive. So instead, I think about what am I going to focus on right now? And I think that to me, that helps me. I mean, if I'm out on a hot call and I have to have situational awareness, or there could be a threat that I need to assess, right? What am I focusing on right now? If we focused always on balance, we would be distracted. And the reality is we don't get anything done if we're trying to focus on everything all the time, right? So when I kind of look at whatever moment I'm in or situation, or if I'm approaching a particular activity, what do I need to focus on right now? And how am I going to make that moment of focus align with kind of my values and where I'm trying to go with things. So for me, it's about focus and that self-assessment. Again, going back to that warrior path, that's why I like that. I'm a very logical, methodical person. So for me to have a way to do that has been helpful. So for me, when I look at self, if I look at those 4 categories, like body, for me, I have a good workout routine. I'm used to work in physical therapy and as a sports performance coach for the last 30 years. I know the things I need to do, but again, during times of stress, those things fall off. So what I've really done is I've designed a program where I'm really not trying to, I'm in my 50s now. I'm not trying to have any athletic competitions or anything like that are just going to be more injurious than helpful.
I thought you were going to say injuries, but yeah, that's the tie-in. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, and I've had those injuries. So, what am I doing to keep myself healthy? So I have a pretty good rhythm there, and, sleep being a priority. And so I used to always give up sleep in order to go work out or pursue some other kind of a thing usually for no good reason. I've alternated between really being strength or size focused versus being an endurance athlete. And if I do one or the other for too long, I just kind of fall apart, right? So the reality is having different areas that I focus on and kind of rotate through those. With mind, I'm a person who believes in being a lifelong learner. So I'm always trying to go out and learn new things. And again, sometimes it's about putting myself in uncomfortable situations to learn about things that, again, aren't what I want to learn about, but are really the information that I need to get. And to me, that growth that I get from that has been helpful, in the bigger picture as well. Finances, my wife and I have regular meetings about finances. That was something I mentioned, all that debt we had. We ended up doing the Financial Peace University with Dave Ramsey program through church. And we eliminated, I think, $40,000 in debt in 6 months by kind of following that program. And, so a lot of those principles that we still, carried forward all these years later. So financially, I think we're doing good. My wife recently got a second job. So she has 2 part-time jobs now, and that's good and bad, right? Again, going back to balance versus focus. And right now we're focusing on her building one of her jobs. And then, spirit, I think honestly, spirit's the area I've struggled the most for a lot of my adult life. I think that moral injury we experience in our work by seeing the terrible things that human beings do to each other. We see the terrible way that we treat each other in our profession. And I think for me, really trying to find that, greater purpose and that, a higher being to answer to, whatever that may look like, has really been something that's hard for me. And I think now that I've kind of come to peace with some of that, it's where it gave me that space to start to have hope and experience joy again, which I wasn't for a while. So I do think that that's an area that's for me somewhere where I really need to put my focus, and I've made a lot of growth, but I think that's an area where I'm still working. So that's self. With organization, when I came to Sumner 3.5 years ago now, the organization it's a great place, a lot of good people, but it wasn't really acting like a family. There was a lot of drama, and I'm not a person who enjoys drama. And I was in a position, being the new guy in a leadership position, where I had to take action against some people who were creating dysfunction in the organization. And that's never a good place to be, especially when you're new to a place. Mm-hmm. So one of the things we did as I got here toward the end of a year. So beginning the first full year I was here, I implemented a program where we did self-reflective journaling. So every member of my organization has to journal once a month. And at the beginning of the year, I kind of set an area of focus. The first year I was here, we were focusing on resilience because we were all coming out of COVID. We were coming out of criminal justice reform. A lot of officers were kind of struggling, and like most cops, what they do is avoidance, right? So they were just not doing police work as much. Mm-hmm. So we really focused on resilience, and we started setting goals and working through our sergeants to kind of mentor their people through what that would look like. And then once a month, they journal about progress they're making, things they're doing toward achieving the goals, as well as journaling about things that they need from us. And I think that has been huge to give them a voice, right? An opportunity to really have a formal way of saying, hey, how am I doing and what do I need? The year 2 after resilience, we focused on growth because I felt like we had built the foundation and then we wanted to kind of grow from there. And so people kind of came up with their career plans, their personal plans, and then we worked with them through those monthly journals to kind of figure out how we could support them with that. And then the third year, which is where we are now, we're focusing on community, and community being community of our organization and our profession, but also the community that we serve. And I felt like that, kind of being formal about how we treat each other like a family and how we view the community that we serve. In Sumner specifically, our youth are the ones that are struggling the most. I see a lot of problems with either behaviors or, we recently got a conviction of a basketball coach that was sexually abusing his players. And, that was really painful for the kids in our community to see their friends go through that, and for those who directly experienced it. So, really figuring out like, what is our role as community builders, and people can pull things together. I brought something down with me from King County with Police Activities League. So, we run after school programs. We have one called Badges and Barbells where we coach weightlifting at the high school. Just finished up girls soccer season and they went to state quarterfinals thanks to my weightlifting coaching, I think. But
yes, I think it has to be that.
It is. But I mean, the thing, and we also have badges in boxing, and then we, in the summertime, we run something called Camp Possible, which is a summer camp for blind and visually impaired kids here in Pierce County. So, I think that does two things. One, I think it shows the community that we care about them and that we are doing very visible things to support members of the community that need help, including within our organization. But I think the other thing it does for us is it helps us remember our purpose and why we're doing this work. And, if you're in law enforcement, you're not doing it to help people who need help, then that's explains a lot about why you're probably struggling in the profession, right? So I think being intentional about how we as an organization support that is huge. So that's kind of the 3 for me, and that's kind of those things that we're trying to work on and focus on. And I think as a leader, a lot of it comes down to money, the budget, and I think that a lot of chiefs that are struggling with how to, have a healthy organization, most of them that I've spoken to haven't gone to their council or their governing body and asked for money to support wellness. And I think they might be surprised when they do that they're going to get the support they need. If you're just waiting for grants to do wellness, if you're waiting for a free app or some other stuff, that's really not going to have an impact. If you go to your people and really figure out what they need, and then you go back to legislative bodies and ask for that, it should be a line item in your budget recurring every year, and it should be growing every year. If you're doing it that way, I think you're doing something right. So that's kind of, for me, those kind of 3 areas of focus: the self, community, self, organization, community. And then within those, for me, journaling is a huge way of doing that assessment. And I think when we make that a formal part of how you do your work, other people see it and they can start to learn about how they can do that for themselves as well.
Yeah. It's it's an element of PTO versus FTO, right? So there's a lot of agencies that take on that framework and institutionalize that. And so, we talk about money, and absolutely we need to ask and we need to show investment in our people, literally, going back to finances. But at the same time, you're talking about developmental efforts that don't cost anything, right? So just having intention, whether it's journaling or whether it's having these formalized sit downs once a month or whatever that looks like, showing people that you care about them, how they're doing, they are tied back into impact, and they're finding themselves amongst a purposeful mission that's absolutely integral to their personal and the organizational wellness. And I like how you talked about a lot of things that kind of ebb and flow in your share, reflecting on your personal insight and then the agency, tying it all together. So thank you for sharing all that.
I just feel like I need to pause for a second, though, because one of the reasons I was so excited to be on here with Andy is he's a man with a vision, and it's just impressive. It means a lot. And so that's my, soaking everything he just said in.
Yeah.
I kind of share, there's so much I want to say from that. I'm a very intentional person. For me, I'm intentional with my goal setting. I'm intentional with how I try to live my life. I have lost a lot of my family through various cancer, diabetes, trauma, you name it. And so it means I'm living a life without my parents. My kids don't have any grandparents on either side. I'm missing one of my brothers passed away in his 20s. I'm missing some of my cousins, a lot of aunts and uncles. But with grief comes gratitude. And so I feel like it's my responsibility, since I'm still here, to take advantage of every opportunity I'm given and to live life with intention. And my husband and I have 2 daughters, 11 and 14. And when they were born, we set some family values. And we try to make all of our parenting decisions with those values in mind, which is easy sometimes and not easy other times. And it also means that grit and resiliency are one of our values. So to be a parent who's trying to raise kids with grit means sometimes I have to let them fail. And then it means a lot of times I have to let them see me fail. So I set a big goal every year, sometimes multiple goals. I try to make one of them fitness related. I try to make one of them personal or professional with knowledge or growth. And then I have a few others that are relationship based. And I don't always make them. And it's hard, but I try to be open with my children and how that path works. And so a year ago, I left a department I'd been in for 20 years that I loved dearly. And I really just had an amazing career where I had spent 20 years doing every specialty I wanted to. I hired people, I backgrounded them, I FTO'd them, I got to supervise them, I got to train them, and it was such a blessing. But it wasn't where I wanted to be, and I knew I needed change. And that was really hard. And so I spent time looking at what was out there. And it's scary, right, to leave your department, but it was the right choice. And so a year ago, I came to where I am now. I just had my 1-year anniversary, and
Congrats.
Thank you. It has been a blessing. Every single day, I have felt welcome in this building. And that's not every police department has that. Not every private sector has that. So my job is to keep that going. I've been invited into this leadership team who established a culture where they had some significant losses, so they take care of each other. So I need to keep that going, and that is a purpose that I was super happy and blessed to be involved in. I also decided that I'm a triathlete, sometimes not a great triathlete. I'm slow and steady, and I had failed at the biggest race about 6 years ago. So I decided my biggest race. So I decided I needed to do another do-over. So last year I set a goal of completing a half Ironman, and I made it. So I have to say, I cried, not the whole 8.5 hours of the race, but the chute coming in, realizing that I'd spent 6 months on a physical goal. And my daughters saw me. They're athletes as well too, but they saw me struggle. They saw me in our garage on my bike for hours. They saw me running at every school event they had. I was running around the campus trying to get my mileage in. They saw me get up at 4 a.m. and go to the pool and try to get back before they woke up. And they saw me do all that. And so when I crossed that finish line, I felt like, one, it was redeeming to hit the fitness goal I'd set for myself. But two, I felt like I'd showed my daughters that you can do hard things and you can demonstrate that. And I'm not in the best shape Um, that was 6 months ago. So I, as a woman in my 40s, to go into a gym full of police officers in their 20s meant that I had to have some humility because I'm lifting weights next to some of my patrol officers who are still able to still going for some pretty impressive PRs. And so I made some decisions that if I'm going to live my values, I'm going to set these big goals. This year's goal is a 350-mile bike ride that I'm going to do in May. So I'll tell you right now, we talk about injuries. My knee is on fire right now because I did a 31-mile bike ride yesterday.
My knees hurt you talking about it, but
And I'm not comfortable on the bike. It scares me. So my goals are often around conquering fears. And so when I pick whatever is most scary to me at the time, and I try to set a fitness or physical goal around that. And I realize that some of cycling is kind of scary to me, and cycling in a big group of riders is pretty scary to me. So I said, why not sign up for the Police Unity Tour and, go with 2,500 other mostly police officers and ride our bikes into DC on Police Week. So I'm going to make it happen. But those are my physical goals that push me, because I also think you get mentally stronger when you are trying to get physically stronger or build endurance. And I will also tell you I'm a writer, but a lot of my writing doesn't always get onto paper, and it doesn't get shared if it is on paper. I write for myself. And so endurance athletes and endurance sports has gotten me time to write. So I process a lot of my feelings, my trauma, my experiences through writing. So it's not uncommon for me to come back from an hour-long run and jot down the poem I wrote in my head. They're not all great, but they make me feel good.
I love it.
So I do share some of my writing publicly, but most of it is for myself. And so I try to share things to talk about making sure my people have avenues, making sure they know that, hey, come into the gym at our police department and you don't have to be the fittest person in there. You're welcome to be in there, because being strong is going to give you a better career, right? Because I'm not dying at 70. It really is one of my biggest goals is to live past 70, because my kids are so awesome and they have already in their short lives conquered some pretty significant things. And I want to see them become parents or grandparents someday. So I don't want to go anywhere. Professionally, those goals and living my values keep me motivated, because I left a department that I was comfortable in. And I came to a department, I didn't know all the policy. I didn't help write any of them. I didn't know the history. I knew some of the public stuff, but I didn't know why this policy existed because of this person, right? We all have those policies and rules. I didn't know that the reason we do this procedure is because this big thing happened 10 years ago and nobody's recovered from it. I didn't know that the way the building is set up and why people are in certain assignments is all because of relationships I didn't know about. So in a way, it was fun and challenging to spend a year learning people, and I'll never stop learning. But also it's scary, and it's fun to be the outside view and go, hey, how do I not say, well, at my old agency, we used to do this. Well, my old place, we used to do this.
Everyone's favorite thing, right?
Right? That makes you real popular. I did make that mistake, and I had some people in the building who tell me the truth and say, hey, just so you know, don't say that in this meeting because you said it in the last two. And I went, thank you. Right? Because there's some things in this department that are way better than my old department. And there's some people here who are willing to tell me the truth, willing to tell me the history, and together we're growing something even better. And also, I cannot explain how amazing it is to walk into a building and feel welcome, and how you can then be invested in making sure everybody feels welcome. Some people aren't going to make it off FTO. I've been here a year, and I've had to have that talk with people at my office of, you're not going to wear a patch anymore, and I'm sorry. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means this isn't the right job for you. But also, if you have built a culture that takes care of people, you know that your field training officers invested everything they could into those people. You know that we're going to learn lessons from the student officers that didn't make it too. We are going to learn from the people that walk out the door just as much as we learn from the people who stayed. And that continual improvement and investment and the willingness to listen to our line staff, because we all know the solutions aren't from the top. I mean, I could solve problems all day long and they're not going to always be the right answer. But if I can work in a culture where my line staff feel empowered because they're doing the work and they probably know how to do it better than the rest of us, that's a pretty special place. Kind of danced around all over there, but
no, I loved it. I think just like DC Andy, you covered it from all angles and you offered so much. And I love how this whole conversation and what you said in the last piece kind of connected it all with wellness being like prime wellness being so much about conquering fear. And it's so much about diving into what is necessary but uncomfortable and absolutely scary, whether it's from earlier in the conversation to as finances to, what do I need now, or how do I adapt my approach? I want to live past X number, right? And all these kind of basal things that we need to recognize in ourselves, and we're not going to recognize them unless we take the time and, as you put it, the intention, and curiously, without judgment, working on that. And I really appreciate truly everything that you've shared with us, and I mean us in the greater sense of anyone that's going to listen to this, because what you're doing, both of you, is modeling all the things, right? Like DC Julie put it out, like as far as your kids, and I've reflected that too, right? I'm not always the best at it, but I don't want to appear perfect or anything close to that for my kid. I want her to see me, and this week's already been several where I said sorry, and I've also said, yeah, I was wrong, you were right. Something about like what book we were in the middle of. We had 2 running books, and I was like, no, it's that one, it's the other, go get that one. And then just because I got annoyed, and I was like, my bad, Dad, I was wrong, you were right, like good for you. Same for, I always get wary comparing parenting to being a supervisor, but it's leadership, and so hopefully people don't get the wrong idea. But I appreciate so much of both of you modeling that and essentially giving permission, because you're official leaders. Also, you've come in, both of you, to a different agency after having a successful, extensive career in a different agency. I think that could be more uncomfortable for people, but to really share and provide all that insight and reflection, I so appreciate it today. I do want to ask both of you if there's anything that you'd kind of like to summarize or close for people to listen, to focus on, who are listening, recognizing it's some people are police applicants and some people are any stage of their career, or civilians, or retired, or about to.
I will say, I think becoming a parent made me a much better leader.
Yes.
And I think there's so many there's a lot of correlation there. But I will say some of the best advice I got was, don't say no first. Don't lead with no. Start with yes for your people and your family, and figure out how you can make things work. And then also, practice gratitude. We didn't talk about gratitude, but if you spend a couple minutes every day realizing all the things you do have going for you, you're just generally a better human being overall, right?
100%. Yeah, I respect that. I have why not written amongst a couple other things on my monitor at work on a sticky note. So absolutely, rather than saying no. DC Andy.
Again, recency bias. One of the things I've been contemplating about is that whole concept that hurt people, healthy people help people, right? And I think that most of us got into this profession because we want to help others. But I think as a leader, I've had a lot of examples in my life and my career where I've seen leaders who were leading from a place of fear and not from a place of love. And I think that as leaders, if we are truly invested in making our organizations and our people healthier, that we're going to avoid a lot of these issues that are the stuff that we don't want to have to deal with later, right? And you still sometimes have to figure out how to support a person, even if you don't support the behavior. Sometimes that means doing that undesirable part of the job of getting rid of people or holding people accountable. But even if that's the work you're working on, if it comes from a place of, compassion, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, that's really well put, right? A fearful leader is going to probably be a fearsome leader, and also probably going to create fearful officers that are going to project fear in the community, whether they like it or not. And conversely, we know what that looks like to be of support, right? It doesn't mean we all have to agree, but we should be aligned, and we should be aligned in caring about each other, the work we're doing, unified vision and mission, right? The reason why we're all here. So I love that closing note. But thank you again so much for coming on. Is there anything as far as contact info where people can find you that they can also find the show notes?
Nope.
Perfect. It's called Boundaries. Look them up.
I was a PIO for long enough that I was broken. So I'm pretty active I have a work Facebook page and I have work LinkedIn. So I'm usually pretty active on those.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much.
I am not. So if you want to find me, you have to reach out to Julie or Eric or one of the other people who have my phone number. And these phones can also be used for making phone calls for people who are not aware. That's usually how I respond best. Is
by why voice. They're called phones.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you both. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts. on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.